I caught my husband sleeping with the postpartum nanny during my postpartum recovery period. Those shameless people called me a frumpy wife and tried to steal my child's custody. My mother-in-law had colluded with the mistress long ago. Even their social media feeds were full of them flaunting their relationship online. I'll play meek, gather evidence, and watch these scumbags get what they deserve. Finally, hell kneel at my door begging for me back, but I'll just say, too late. 3 years into our marriage, David Miller and I finally had our first child, but I caught David Miller and the postpartum nanny together in a maternity center. David, how much longer do I have to pretend to be a postpartum nanny? I really don't want to serve that old hag anymore. The woman's face was flushed, her eyes full of lust, and David Miller let out a low growl. As soon as that frumpy wife finishes her postpartum recovery period, I'll ask her for a divorce. David Miller's expression when he spoke of me was cold, completely unlike his usual self. Aunt Miller said we absolutely have to get custody of the child. I couldn't help but clench my fists. The postpartum nanny had been recommended by my mother-in-law. She had actually found a mistress for David Miller. They want my child? They'll have to see if I, the mother, agree first. 1. Sarah. Something came up at the university. I have to go, David Miller said, looking at me pleadingly. All right. Don't worry. Seeing his eyes full of me, I patted his head, completely at ease. David Miller left in a hurry. Sarah, I'll go check on the baby. As soon as David Miller left, the postpartum nanny also departed. Feeling bored, I decided to stroll around the maternity center. As I passed a certain room, a familiar voice drifted into my ears. Stop it, be gentle. This sweet, delicate voice, wasn't it the postpartum nanny, Jessica? When did Jessica get a boyfriend? Young people these days are so energetic. Doing this in broad daylight. I was chuckling to myself, about to leave. The next second, I heard my husband's voice. Be gentle where? Here? Or here? My mind went blank instantly, and the blood in my veins seemed to freeze, trembling. I quietly pushed the door open a crack and peered inside. My husband, who was supposed to be at the university, was now rolling around on the bed sheets with the postpartum nanny, who was supposed to be taking care of the baby. David, how much longer do I have to be the postpartum nanny? I really don't want to serve that old hag anymore. The woman arched her back, her face flushed, and David Miller let out a low growl. As soon as that frumpy wife finishes her postpartum recovery period, I'll ask her for a divorce. I widened my eyes, staring fixedly at the repulsive scene. Shaking uncontrollably with rage, Aunt Miller said, once we get custody of the child, that woman will be useless, Jessica said arrogantly. I couldn't believe that my mother-in-law, who always treated me like a sister, knew all about this. Even more, I couldn't believe that David Miller, who always called me his wife, had already found a mistress outside. Thinking back to when my mother-in-law and David Miller introduced me to this postpartum nanny, I was so grateful, believing I had a good person by my side. I didn't expect that I was the biggest fool. Being led around by them, tears welled up uncontrollably. I opened my phone and recorded the scene before me. They want my child? They'll have to see if I, the mother, agree first. 2. I was in a daze until I returned to my room. David Miller and I met on a blind date. He was a university professor, gentle and refined, with remarkable conversation skills. As for me, my mother passed away early, so I became independent in the business world at a young age, a strong woman battling it out. I had given up hope on marriage, thinking it would just be a relationship of mutual respect, living together. But I never expected David Miller to spend 2 whole years warming my heart and making our home feel warm. He would tuck me in bed, gently kiss my forehead, and say, Sarah, get up and eat breakfast. Whenever I worked late and came home, there was always a warm yellow light on for me, and he would be in the kitchen making me a late-night snack. My colleagues all said no couple was still in their honeymoon phase after being married like us. Sarah, happy birthday. Your gift is in the room. Sarah, it's Valentine's Day today. Here are your flowers. Sarah, I'm going to be a dad. And my mother-in-law was unusually good-natured. I lost my mother when I was young, and my mother-in-law treated me like her own daughter, shed by me gifts every now and then. And when she heard I was pregnant, she even specifically moved in to take care of me. After getting pregnant, I resigned from my job at David Miller and my mother-in-law's urging, my eyes full of hope for the future. I thought this was a gift from heaven. Never imagining that arsenic and sugar could look so alike, I slowly closed my eyes, wanting to laugh and cry at the same time, tears uncontrollably overflowing. David Miller. Turns out I was just a breeding tool, Turns out your so-called care was just to monitor me. Making it easy for you to cheat, Mom. I don't have a home anymore. 3. Jessica walked into the room with food. I turned my head to look at the bright sunshine outside. But why did I feel so cold? I noticed there was shrimp in the food and coldly knocked over the dishes. Ah, it hurts. The hot porridge spilled on Jessica's hand, and she couldn't help but scream. David Miller heard the commotion and rushed in immediately. Sarah, what's wrong? What happened? Looking at his anxious face, I felt nothing but sorrow and absurdity. A glimmer of hope flickered in my heart. But the next second David Miller carefully lifted Jessica's hand. Sarah, how could you be so careless and burn Jessica? David, don't blame Sarah. It must be something I did to upset Sarah, Jessica said, whimpering with eyes red like a rabbit. But her body kept leaning against David Miller. I didn't miss the malice in her eyes as she looked at me. David Miller. I'm allergic to shrimp. I stared into David Miller's eyes, saying with helplessness and bitterness, Sarah, even if you're allergic, you could just not eat it. There's no need to waste Jessica's thoughtful gesture. But David Miller, you only saw that she got splashed on her hand, but half the hot porridge spilled on the bedsheets. I'm a person who feels pain and gets hurt too. It felt like something was stuck in my throat, making it difficult and painful to swallow. Hey, you kid, don't you care about your own wife? Sarah, I'll go buy you something to eat. David Miller, take Jessica to get that treated. My mother-in-law rushed in, wiped the porridge off the bed sheets for me, and sent David Miller away. I looked at her. A complex emotion surged in my heart, and my eyes felt hot. Mom, could it be that I misunderstood you? But after they left, I went out to the bathroom and overheard their hushed scheming. My mother-in-law whispered, you two must be very careful, don't let her see through it. My heart instantly plummeted into an ice cellar. 4. David Miller's students came to visit me. David Miller still acted like a good husband, peeling fruit for me and gently asking about my health. Mrs. Miller, you don't know. Professor Miller has been so busy taking care of you, he hasn't been to the university for days. David Miller's favorite student said to me with a grin, while the others looked at me with envy. See, everyone thinks we're a model couple. It's a shame David Miller went to get hot water dispenser, otherwise his expression right now would be quite something. After all, David Miller had been telling me he was going to the university every day the past few days. My heart's temperature dropped little by little. Right? I saw Professor Miller's social media feed a few days ago, and your interaction below it was so sweet. We couldn't get enough. But I clearly remember David Miller hadn't posted on his social media feed, and I hadn't commented at all. A cold smile curled on my lips. Which one were you all laughing about? Let me see. David Miller's students didn't notice and naturally scrolled to that social media feed post to show me. I clicked on the affection profile picture in the comments, and that's how it was. This was Jessica's messaging app, and David Miller had another messaging app account he kept from me. The two of them frequently flaunted their relationship online on the social media feed, and Jessica was also considered Mrs. Miller. My fingertips paused, my eyes stinging. The pinned post was a photo taken from a sneaky angle, with the caption, Hot Springs with my dear, but the date was the day I gave birth. 5. David Miller came back, and I returned the phone to his students. After David Miller saw the students out, I used my new messaging app account to open Jessica's social media feed. I scrolled through post after post, and with each one, my heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. In the photos, David Miller and Jessica were laughing and playing in the hot springs, and the time the photos were taken was exactly when I was in agonizing pain and hemorrhaging in the delivery room. I was struggling between life and death, but my husband was frolicking in the water with his mistress. I felt something churning in my stomach, so nauseated I wanted to vomit. Sarah, why do you look so pale? David Miller walked in, his hand on my forehead. His eyes were clear, staring intently at me, his gaze still full of affection, as he leaned down, about to kiss me. At that moment, I couldn't help but think, David Miller, is this how you look at her too? 2 lines of clear tears streamed down my face. I turned my head to avoid David Miller's kiss, my voice muffled. David Miller, do you love me? My eyes were red, and I stared at him unblinkingly. How I wished to see a trace of guilt or panic on his face, but there was only sincerity. Sarah, of course, I love you. Kiss kiss Sarah. Don't cry Sarah. Seeing me cry, David Miller's eyes were full of heartache, but I became clearer and clearer. David Miller, do you know that when you act well, it's easy to get too deep into character? 6. David Miller suspected I had postpartum depression. He patiently coaxed me to see a doctor for a checkup. Sarah, will you go get checked out, okay? If mommy is not feeling well, it will affect our baby, right? I looked at him, half believing, half doubting. But thinking of the baby, my heart couldn't help but soften. Sarah, I've picked out a name for the baby. How about Millie Miller? I froze, looking at him calmly, and asked Ling. Yes, Sarah. It's the Lin from your name. Let me think about it. Seeing my hesitation, a rare flicker of panic and helplessness appeared on David Miller's face. I took David Miller's phone, and he handed it to me readily. Do you think a man who willingly hands over his phone isn't cheating? They're just confident that you won't find proof of their cheating. I sent David Miller away, logged into his other messaging app account, and added my new messaging app account to his contacts. Looking at my account mixed in with ads for baby products, I scrolled through David Miller and Jessica's chat history. David, let's name the baby Millie Miller. But will Sarah really not suspect anything? David, didn't you say you loved me the most? Besides, she doesn't know which character it is. Worst case, well, just say we made a mistake when we registered the baby's birth. How would she ever suspect us? Jessica's tone was mostly arrogant and overbearing, and David Miller would only indulge her. Looking quite in love, I looked at the screen and smiled faintly. My child will not take his last name. 7. My mother-in-law and Jessica also encouraged me to get the checkup. In the past, I would have readily agreed with joy. I might even have thought David Miller and my mother-in-law genuinely cared about me. But now, I couldn't help but sneer. Nothing good comes without a price. That evening, watching David Miller sleep beside my bed, the moonlight spilled on his tired face. I gently reached out and stroked his face. David, are you asleep? I called him softly, seeing he didn't move. I took his phone from his pocket. Mom, will this work? Isn't this too cruel to Sarah? Son, don't worry, I've found someone I know. Well, just say she has postpartum depression and can't take care of the child. Once we have the child in our hands, she won't dare make a fuss. Looking at the chat history, my brow furrowed. How shameless. They're planning to use my child to blackmail me. A fire ignited in my heart, resentment surging. Besides, she doesn't have a job. What are we afraid of? If it really goes to courtroom, the child will be awarded to us too. My mother-in-law's confident tone made me feel sick. Back then, when I first got pregnant, my mother-in-law brought bags and bags to our home. I worked late into the night, and my mother-in-law made me a late-night snack. My eyes turned red in the steam. Sarah, you work too hard. Just quit your job. You can always find a new one after the baby is born. What I thought was genuine concern for me turned out to be a deliberate calculation to trap me. David Miller, I'm willing to get checked. 8. The next day, Chloe arrived with a nationally renowned psychiatrist. David Miller and my mother-in-law were caught off guard. Sarah, what is the meaning of this? Mom has already found a doctor for you. Why waste money hiring such an expensive one? My mother-in-law seemed to have grown impatient. Now she couldn't even keep up the pretense. What is the meaning of this? Isn't Sarah getting checked for the baby? Does David Miller not even have this much money? Chloe was fiery and didn't hold back, lecturing them without mercy. A hint of embarrassment flickered across David Miller's face. Jessica stepped in front of him, looking down at me. Sarah, don't go too far. Aunt Miller has done so much for you, and you're not even grateful. Now you're even calling outsiders to lecture Aunt Miller. You're just ungrateful. My mother-in-law pretended to have chest pain, and Jessica immediately rushed to support her. Smack. An unexpected scene unfolded before everyone. I slapped Jessica hard across the face. Jessica, who do you think you are, daring to lecture me? My Chloe is my family. Who do you think you are to point fingers? Jessica's face turned pale, one hand covering her face, looking at David Miller with tearful eyes. Yes, I'm an outsider. You're a family. Seeing David Miller avoid her gaze, Jessica cried and ran out the door. Sarah, you've gone too far this time. David Miller's face was ashen, his voice somewhat deep. David, are you going to blame me too? But didn't you want me to get checked? David, I'm doing all this for you and the baby. I reached out and tugged on David Miller's sleeve, biting my lip, looking very helpless. All right, Sarah, I was just anxious. Get some rest. Watching David Miller and my mother-in-law walk away, Chloe and I exchanged a smile. 9. Sarah, I've already asked about a job for you. Seeing Chloe's expression, like a mother not minding her child's ugliness, my nose couldn't help but sting. True understanding and respect mean not asking why, but always believing in you. But are you really planning on just getting divorced like this? Chloe looked at me with an expression full of disbelief. Just now she said we were family. Now she's looking down on me. No matter what, I can't let the baby fall into their hands. I looked at the little one in my arms, with fair skin and a tender, red face. Whether it's for myself or for the baby, I must get this divorce. I have to make myself strong enough to have the confidence to protect my child. I took my ID card, David Miller's ID card, and our birth certificate, and went to register the baby's birth. The baby is named Pax Adams. Mommy hopes you grow up safe and sound, Sarah. Why did you register the baby's birth alone? My mother-in-law rushed over after learning I had registered the baby's birth, immediately lecturing me. What are you so anxious about? Does it matter if the registration happens a day sooner or later? Ignoring her rambling, I handed the birth certificate to David Miller. Sarah, why does the child have your last name? David Miller looked at the 3 words on the birth certificate, his face full of anger. David Miller, what do you mean? I gave birth to the child, not you. So of course, he takes my last name. I shut David Miller up with a few words. He wanted to say something else but couldn't. Looking deflated, David, I think Sarah is right anyway. It's your child. It doesn't matter whose last name they take. Jessica linked her arm through mine, winked at me, and said sweetly, what trick is this little green tea trying to pull? It must be poison meant to kill me. It's not like she's suddenly grown a conscience, is it? 10. Oh, David Miller. I'm finishing my postpartum recovery period soon. Jessica can be dismissed, I said calmly, directly in front of Jessica. Sarah, what are you doing? David Miller's brow furrowed instantly, his eyes anxious. Jessica has taken care of you for so long. Even if she didn't achieve anything, she still put in the effort. How can you just dismiss her? Seeing David Miller desperately defending Jessica, explaining himself haphazardly, the last glimmer of hope in my heart was extinguished. David Miller, you've broken character. You're really not a good actor. Is this what it means to be uncontrollably in love? David Miller, you're protecting her so much. Anyone who didn't know would think she was your wife. I looked at David Miller and said coldly, Sarah, how can you falsely accuse people? David and I are innocent. Jessica's face instantly flushed red, but she remained arrogant and haughty, as if she had suffered some great humiliation. David Miller, it's her or me or her. If you're not willing to dismiss her, we'll meet at the courthouse for divorce filing. I threw the last choice at David Miller. 11. Sarah, aren't you afraid David Miller will really divorce you for that mistress? Seeing me lounging at her home, eating potato chips and watching TV, looking quite relaxed, Chloe couldn't help but ask, if he doesn't come looking for me like this? I'd be very happy, I said leisurely. If he does come looking for me, I'd be even happier. The thought of that scene made me laugh. You love-struck idiot, I'm going to kill you. Seeing my clueless look, Chloe was furious and reached out to hit me. Stop. If he doesn't come looking for me, it would be letting him off too easily. I put down the snacks, my expression serious. What I want is for him to come looking for me. Chloe looked at my half-smile, half-sneer, and her expression turned chilling. Oh right, you left that day. But my nurse friend said David Miller's mother had a big fight with that mistress. David Miller's mother and Jessica fighting. That old woman cursed the other woman for not knowing how to talk, and said the child should take the husband's last name. That mistress, in turn, called the old woman stupid and said since they were getting divorced soon anyway, why bother with so much? Chloe said, laughing uncontrollably. Hearing this, I understood, ultimately. These two couldn't stand each other. David Miller didn't come looking for me, but his mother did. I poured the takeout food porridge into an insulated food container and headed to the hospital. Sarah, I miss you so much. Seeing me arrive, David Miller managed to prop himself up. David Miller's face was pale, wearing a hospital gown and lying in bed, looking quite ill. I put down the insulated food container, didn't look at David Miller, and planned to turn and leave. 3, 2, 1. Sarah, I was wrong. Hearing David Miller's words, I paused. 12, but the next second, I continued to walk away. Sarah, I've already dismissed her. David Miller stumbled getting out of bed, pulled his wound, and fell. I quickly went over to help him up, but David Miller hugged me tightly. Sarah, please don't leave me, okay? Sarah, the baby definitely doesn't want to see us like this. David Miller's tone was cautious, his eyes red-rimmed, his voice full of grievance. My heartstrings vibrated, feeling something rapidly flowing out. I cupped David Miller's face, looking earnestly at his eyes, which were full of me. I suddenly remembered an afternoon when David Miller and I were leisurely basking in the sun. He suddenly cupped my face and said, "Sarah, you have me in your eyes." Back then, he would be ecstatic just seeing my reflection in my eyes. My heart slowly paused a few beats, then pounded violently. Finally returning to calm. "All right, David Miller. This is the last time." I smiled at him, seeing him happy like a child who got candy. "But David Miller, we can't go back. We can't go back for a long time. It's too late. Everything is too late." I quickly wiped away the unshed tear. 13. David Miller fell asleep. I took out his phone, opened the chat history, and took photos as evidence. It turned out Jessica had thrown a tantrum, and to appease her, David Miller had been busy for days without time to eat. Finally, his stomach problems flared up. But Jessica got scared and ran off. David Miller was sent to the ICU. After waking up, he kept demanding to see me. David Miller's mother had no choice but to swallow her pride and come find me. "Mom, haven't you figured it out yet? Only Sarah is a wife who knows how to manage a home, who can stand Jessica's princess temper. But son, Jessica's father is high-ranking. He can help you get promoted just by saying a word, but Jessica doesn't know how to take care of anyone. But Sarah is no help to your career. Don't you want a better job?" "Okay, Mom, I'll think about it." I took photos of the latest chat history, looking at the sleeping David Miller. David Miller. David Miller, you are truly disgusting. In the following days, David Miller and I reconciled and were as loving as ever, and he no longer contacted Jessica. Watching David Miller busy in the kitchen, I felt as if I was back to when we first got married. No Jessica, no catching him cheating. David Miller. See, we were about to be happy. But why did you have to break all of this? 14. I arranged to meet Jessica. Jessica came stomping in with bouncy curls, perfect makeup, and high heels clicking clack, clack, clack. She threw her bag down in front of me, her tone lazy. "What is it?" I showed her the video on my phone of her and David Miller getting busy. To my surprise, she only glanced at it, didn't even remove her sunglasses, and was completely unconcerned. "Whatever. You were going to find out eventually, since you look so pathetic. I'll say a couple of things. David is my ex-boyfriend, and we still love each other. As for you, it's just because I can't have children, and that old woman needed to be satisfied, trying to provoke me." But what she said was true. Although I had long suspected they had been in contact for a long time, hearing the truth still made me feel sick. Turns out David Miller had approached me with a purpose from the very beginning. The truth felt like countless needles piercing my heart. "I came here to tell you that I won't divorce David Miller." I calmed down and showed Jessica David Miller and my mother-in-law's chat history. The photos only showed David Miller's line. "Only Sarah is a wife who knows how to manage a home, who can stand Jessica's princess temper." Jessica snatched the phone, took off her sunglasses, and looked closely, seeming utterly disbelieving. "How dare he? Everything he has was given by my father." 15. Just as I expected, Jessica caused a huge scene at the university where David Miller taught. David Miller, who always cared about his reputation, was utterly mortified. He quickly pulled her into his office. As soon as they entered the office, Jessica instantly put on a pitiful act. Her head bowed so low it almost touched her chest, her voice choked with tears. "David, please don't abandon me, okay?" Looking at her, anyone who didn't know would truly think she had suffered a terrible injustice. David Miller was still trying to explain things to her, but before he could speak, Jessica suddenly stood on her tiptoes, wrapped her arms around David Miller's neck, and kissed him. At first, David Miller resisted a little, his body tensing instantly, but gradually, he closed his eyes. One hand unconsciously tightened around Jessica's slender waist, and the other hand also began to wander restlessly. "David Miller, why are you doing this to me?" The lunchbox I had prepared for David Miller clattered to the floor, the food spilling everywhere. The students who came with me were stunned speechless. David Miller and Jessica were kissing passionately, utterly lost in the moment. Hearing my voice, David Miller snapped back to reality and quickly pushed Jessica away forcefully. He walked towards me frantically, muttering repeatedly, "Sarah, listen to me. I can explain." I watched him silently. This time, my eyes weren't red. I took a deep breath and calmly, firmly said the words, "David Miller, let's get a divorce." 16. David Miller was suspended from the university due to his misconduct. But David Miller and I both knew he could never work at the university again. How important is reputation to a professor? Because of this incident, He had become infamous at the university, his reputation ruined. I didn't give David Miller time to react. I took the lawyer I had found long ago and filed for a contested divorce. In the courtroom, David Miller was still trying to say something to me, but I presented all the evidence I had collected earlier. Mr. David Miller repeatedly cheated on Ms. Sarah during her pregnancy. Mr. David Miller and his mother and Ms. Jessica repeatedly carried out a scheme to deceive Ms. Sarah, attempting to gain custody of Ms. Sarah's child through illegal means. As the evidence was presented one by one, David Miller's gaze towards me shifted from anxious and hopeful to finally dim and empty. David Miller's mother still tried to argue, saying that even if I had a job, I wouldn't have time to take care of the child. She, as the child's grandmother, should help take care of the child. Unfortunately, the judge wouldn't listen to her arguments. In the end, David Miller was left with nothing in the divorce. And I also gained custody of Pax Adams. A woman is naturally weak, but as a mother, she is strong, baby. No matter how difficult or bitter the future is, mommy will protect you. 17. David Miller regretted it. The day after I moved into Chloe's home, he knelt at the door, apologizing over and over. Sarah, I was wrong. Please listen to my explanation. It turned out Jessica was David Miller's first love. The two were originally in love, but after discovering Jessica couldn't get pregnant, David Miller's mother-in-law came up with this idea: find a virtuous and kind wife, give birth to David Miller's child, and then divorce her. This way, the Miller family wouldn't be without an heir, and David Miller could still be with Jessica. Chloe was disgusted by David Miller's explanation from outside the door. David Miller, go to hell. Your whole family is twisted. How could you even think of something so disgusting? No wonder you'll have no descendants. Chloe launched into a tirade against David Miller. I know I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. All I want now is to live a good life with Sarah. Sarah will have to work and take care of the child alone. It will definitely be very difficult. I opened the door and saw David Miller with messy hair, disheveled clothes, stubble, and red eyes, but I felt no sympathy or pity in my heart. I just wondered, how did I ever fall in love with him? David Miller, I will only be better off without you. The biggest hardship I've endured in my life was marrying you. I left these two sentences without hesitation. I saw David Miller's eyes gradually dim, lifeless, his gaze vacant. 18. David Miller's mother became a vegetative state after I won the courtroom case. David Miller's mother and Jessica had a fierce argument. David Miller's mother felt that all of this was Jessica's fault. She lost her precious grandson, her son lost his wife. It was all because of that little vixen Jessica. If it weren't for her deliberately seducing David Miller, how could David Miller have made a mistake? Besides, it was just cheating. What man doesn't cheat? But Jessica actually publicized the matter at the university. Her son was insulted every day, and he lost his job. Jessica, however, felt that if it weren't for that old-fashioned woman, she would have married David Miller already. What if she didn't have children, couldn't get pregnant? She could adopt. Now David Miller was divorced, but he was cutting ties with her. It must be that old woman interfering again. During another argument, Jessica angrily pushed David Miller's mother. She rolled down the stairs and fell into a vegetative state, and Jessica was sued by David Miller for aggravated assault causing serious bodily injury. In the courtroom, Jessica was furious and retaliated by accusing David Miller of taking bribes at work. Just like that, the two of them, this loving couple, both ended up in prison. It wasn't over yet. 19. Hello everyone, I am Sarah. I have publicly reported a maternity center suspected of providing services that induce male infidelity. I exposed that maternity center, stirring up a storm online. News about maternity centers providing special services trended on social media. Many maternity centers were reported and investigated. Through the internet, I learned that there were so many women, like me, who had been kept in the dark. A woman is pregnant for 10 months, gives birth in one go. Only mothers who are experiencing or have experienced it know the hardships involved. But are pregnant women's rights truly protected? This time one maternity center fell, but there are thousands and thousands of maternity centers. What truly needs attention is the protection of pregnant women's rights. I am not just speaking out for myself, but for every pregnant woman and every mother. End of main story extra. David Miller won. Jessica and I were in the hot springs, but I felt a little anxious and uneasy, because today my Sarah was giving birth. David What are you thinking about? You're not paying attention to me. The misty steam obscured my vision, and Jessica seemed to notice my distraction. Jessica's hand fumbled under the water, and I couldn't help but tense up, deliberately scolding her. Stop it. But I wasn't really angry, on the contrary. One thing I liked about Jessica was that she was much more interesting than my Sarah, more creative, and more generous. Sarah was indeed well-behaved and sensible, and a good homemaker, but after a while, I found it hard to feel any passion for her. Only with Jessica could I find some excitement in my life. Hello, Mom? What? Sarah is hemorrhaging? I was extremely anxious. I quickly got dressed, left Jessica behind, and rushed to the hospital. Looking at Sarah, who was as white as paper being wheeled out of the operating room, I suddenly felt very guilty. This was my wife who had walked through the gates of hell for me, so I gently hugged her and kissed her. Sarah, you worked hard, too. When Mom and Jessica first told me about the plan, I was furious and slammed my fist on the table. Isn't this absurd? How would Sarah live like this? But Jessica cried and asked me, David, what about me? Do I have to be an underground lover forever? David, you said you loved me. I admit that in that moment, I was flustered. I didn't know how to face Jessica and my wife. I didn't expect things to turn out this way. I thought what I had with Jessica was just mutual consent, a casual encounter. Taking care of my wife was my responsibility. But now, I also had to be responsible for Jessica. Mom said Jessica could help me succeed in my career and agreed to me being with Jessica. But I don't know what I was hesitant about. I just didn't want to see Sarah's disappointed gaze. Jessica came looking for me again, but my wife was still downstairs on the second floor. Jessica clung to me, wanting to do it, and while I was immersed in the pleasure, I was also thinking about my wife. I had never done anything so thrilling. This feeling was addictive, and I admit I was getting a bit hooked. 3. My wife lost her temper. She said the porridge Jessica made had shrimp in it, and she was allergic to shrimp. I had told Jessica many times, but she was too childish and insisted on doing it. My mom was still watching outside. I couldn't make Jessica unhappy, so I had to inconvenience my wife. How did I not notice my wife got burned too? Mom saw my distraction and reminded me not to give myself away. You mean the social media feed? I couldn't help it. Jessica always liked to mess around, and if she didn't post on social media feed, she'd go trouble my wife, to keep my wife from finding out. I got another messaging app account. Jessica always liked to comment below, but others thought she was my wife. How could my wife be so childish and troublesome? Jessica's princess temper was really hard to deal with. 4. My wife suddenly cried. Her tears flowed non-stop, dripping onto the back of my hand. I panicked. Had she found out something? Thankfully, she hadn't. My wife was just feeling insecure. I kissed her, trying to comfort her, but my wife seemed to be sulking. I looked it up online and it said pregnant women are prone to postpartum depression. I wanted to take my wife to see a therapist, but I didn't expect my mom to come up with such an idea. That was really going too far. I remembered how my wife cried. If I really did that, how sad would my wife be? My wife found a therapist herself. Looks like Mom's plan won't work out. For some reason, I felt a sense of relief instead. Though my wife's tone was a bit excessive, she did yield to me. I couldn't bear to be harsh on my wife. 5. My wife was getting more and more excessive and willful. My child wasn't going to take my last name. Even if she didn't like the name I chose, she should have discussed it with me. She actually took the child to register the baby's birth by herself. My wife lost her temper again. She wanted me to get rid of Jessica. To be honest, I also found being with Jessica a bit dull and uninteresting now. But if I sent Jessica away, there'd be a load of trouble to deal with. It was such a headache. My wife actually wants to divorce me. No. According to Mom and Jessica's plan, I should be happy about this. But why do I feel a little lost? Jessica caused trouble again. This time I had a crucial proposal to write. I stayed up for 3 days and finally submitted it. But I felt so much pain, my stomach hurt badly. But Jessica got scared and ran away, even asking if I was going to die. I really can't stand it anymore. I want my wife. 6. My wife agreed to reconcile, and everything was getting back on track. But then, Jessica came looking for me again. I was afraid the students at the university would find out, so I pulled her into the office. But who knew she'd just kiss me directly? I didn't push her away. Why didn't I push her away? If only I had pushed her away sooner, then maybe my wife wouldn't have seen it, and none of this would have ended this way. She said she wanted to divorce me, This time she wasn't crying. Her eyes were so determined. I admit I panicked. I really panicked. I had planned to live a good life with her. During this time, we bought clothes for the baby together and played with the baby together. How did I mess it up? How did it end up in courtroom? So she knew all along. She knew everything I had done. It was too late. Everything was too late, but I wasn't willing to accept it. I still wanted to explain. I believed she loved me. As long as I explained clearly, we could. Maybe there was still a possibility, right? But she said, without me, she would be better off. Looking at the window in the prison, a ray of sunlight came through, and I collapsed to the ground. Yes, Sarah will only be better off without me. I had so many chances. I could have had a happy home. End of text.